So Valve just allowed souvenir skins to be traded up, and the market has reacted massively. 3-cent skins skyrocketed in price, while high-tier coverts like the Desert Hydra and Eye of Horus tanked. In fact, some skins like the Eye of Horus are still down about 40% from a week ago. But is all this really warranted? And what impact does this change actually have on the market long term? Will everyone now be able to afford a Dragon Lore? Well, let's have a look at the numbers. I collected data on the entire supply of normal and souvenir grade skins for the 2014 Cobblestone collection that features the legendary Dragon Lore. And I want you to guess before I reveal the totals. If we trade up every single souvenir skin all the way up to Dragon Lores, how many more of any condition do you think we would get? Well, this table summarizes the total number of souvenir skins in each rarity tier and the potential new supply if we trade up all the lower rarity skins. In the end, for about 500,000 total souvenir skins, we get just 136 new Dragon Lores. With 6.6k already in existence, that's a 2% supply increase if every single skin was traded up, which of course won't happen in reality. So unfortunately for you, no $10 Dragon Lore. But what about other popular collections like Dust 2 or Mirage 2021? This video's sponsor, SkinSwap, is giving you a skin worth up to $50 entirely for free whenever you do your first trade and use my referral code. If you want to refresh your loadout, you can trade your skins for brand new ones in just a couple of seconds. Plus, their market tab now integrates cheap listings from Chinese sites so you can access the best prices without the need for a Chinese ID or bank account. They accept deposits via crypto, MasterCard, and Visa. If you want to cash out, SkinSwap makes that simple too with instant sell options to PayPal or crypto. On top of that, they run free daily, weekly, and monthly giveaways with the chance to earn extra entries simply by trading. Use the link below for a 3% lifetime sales bonus and a free skin worth up to $50. Big thanks to SkinSwap for supporting the channel. First, let's look at which collections were actually impacted by this change. Of course, the collection needs to have a map package that dropped during a major tournament in order to have souvenir skins. I counted a total of 19 collections, going all the way back to 2013. But for the sake of this analysis, I'm not going to look at most of the older collections like Cash or the 2018 collections for Inferno and Nuke, which were also in the active drop pool and just have huge overall supply. Instead, let's focus on the 7 most recent collections, starting with Ancient, released in 2020, all the way to Train 2025. Ancient was first available as part of Operation Broken Fang, and Vertigo, Mirage, and Dust 2 2021 were available in the Operation Riptide store. These Operation Redemptions were the only opportunity to get normal grade skins for these collections. And since then, any new supply has come from trade ups or opening souvenir packages. So let's take a look at the numbers. And while I collected data for every condition for Cobblestone, it would have taken too long to do so every time. So for the rest of the collections, we're only looking at factory new skins. However, they are usually the most desirable and most pricey in any case, so it should give us a good picture regardless. The other thing to note though while scrolling through the numbers here is that it does not take float cap into account. The calculations are simply based on total factory new supply. However, even though this is likely generous, Vertigo 2021 would still only see a roughly 8.5% increase, and Anubis, Overpass 2024 and Train 2025 only see a roughly 1% change. So already a price drop of 40% seems excessive for the Eye of Horus, although we will soon dive a bit deeper. At first glance from this set of data, it seems like the Mirage and Dust 2 collection have the greatest chance to fall in price, given trading up all factory new souvenir skins would, based on this calculation, increase supply by 24 and 41% respectively. However, skins like the classified UMP Fade actually have a 0 to 0.08 float cap, meaning you need a float under 0.008 to actually get a factory new gold arabesque. And these skins will obviously not only be much rarer, but also extremely expensive, demanding significant overpay. Of course, you could also put a higher float UMP with low float fillers to reduce the cost, but we will touch back on this soon. Also, remember that statistically it doesn't matter if we attempt trade ups with 10 Dust 2 inputs, guaranteeing a gold arabesque, or do 10% trade ups. Mathematically, it doesn't change the number of gold arabesques crafted over a large dataset with hundreds or thousands of trade ups being completed. If we now look at the Dust 2 data, but take into account this maximum float for each skin, in order to trade up to a Factory New Covert, the numbers start to look a little different. This table has the total souvenir supply, the factory new souvenir supply, the maximum float for each skin to trade up to a factory new covert, the supply of that skin under the maximum float, and then the ratio of these skins under the required float to the total souvenir supply of that skin. As you can see here, all of the skins are sitting around 10%. And why is that? Well, the drop rate for the gold arabesque itself from the souvenir package is 9.86% due to its 0 to 0.7 float cap. For those of you who don't know how the float caps affect drop rates exactly, let me do a quick breakdown. Essentially, almost all 0 to 1 float range skins have a drop distribution that looks like this. Without going into too much detail, you essentially take these rates and squeeze them onto whichever float range the skin has. For instance, this is what it looks like for the negative loudmouth with a float range of 0.14 to 0.65. And a quick shout out to the CS Float blog for these graphs. So it makes sense then that there's the exact same thing here for the ancient collection. I took all of the same data for total souvenir supply, the max float, and souvenir supply under the required threshold. And as you can see, drop rates all sit at about 3%, which is again the exact drop rate of the Factory New Welcome to the Jungle. Also, you'll notice for both of these collections that the total supply of each skin from any given rarity is nearly identical. For instance, all of the Dust 2 restricteds have roughly 31,000 supply, and all of the ancient classified skins have roughly 3.7k. Again, thanks to drop rates, this is pretty uniform. That's great news for me, since instead of manually taking the supply data for every single skin from every single collection, I can now simply use these statistical averages to extrapolate. That's exactly what I've done here. For each collection, I got supply data for one skin from each rarity, then used that alongside the statistical drop rates to calculate the theoretical change in total Factory New supply of the skin if every souvenir skin under the Factory New threshold was traded up. The next thing you might ask me is, what if we also use minimal wear skins alongside fillers? Well, I ran the calculations again, this time altering the covert drop rate to include all Factory New and minimal wear skins. Of course, these values are quite high, some now at over 50%, but this is a very generous overestimation by any account. There is obviously no way every single Factory New and minimal wear float scaling item will be traded up. The cost would be insane by that point, let alone skins forgotten in old accounts or even banned. If you've made it this far, I've got something for you. I'm giving away a pair of field-tested driver glove hand sweaters to one of you this month. To enter, just like the video and leave a comment on which CS2 skin you think is the most overrated. I'll be picking the winner on May 31st. Good luck. So to summarize my research then, I've put both estimations into the first two columns and averaged them out. I still think these numbers are slightly exaggerated, so in reality, I'd expect it to be lower than this. But as you can see on the right, I've taken each of the collection's covert skin price pre-update, adjusted it to account for the average supply increase, and then noted the dollar and percentage difference between this adjusted value and the current CS float price. For all 7 of these collections, the market would seem to have overreacted. This is especially prominent for Train 2025 and Anubis, where the prices have fallen roughly 40% despite a potential supply increase in the single digits. Therefore, personally, I'll be buying skins from both of these collections as I think it's a severe overcorrection. Another interesting one is Overpass with the Be the Monster, where honestly, the total supply is pretty much negligible, at perhaps 2% increase. But of course, that one is also due to the armory rotation, or lack thereof. So while I imagine prices of low tier souvenir skins will continue to rise to eventually meet their normal grade counterparts, I also imagine the prices of these high tier coverts should recover with time. Of course, these price drops also coincide with a broader market downturn, a loss in confidence perhaps in Valve once again, and frustration with the armory, so it's not the sole factor. But I'm really curious to hear what you guys think of this breakdown. It took me a few days to wrap my head around it and decide how I wanted to go about these calculations, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on the CS2 market, be sure to subscribe and check out my latest episode of Skin Economy, my weekly talk show where we discuss all things CS2 skins, news, and investing. Thanks so much for watching, and take care.